So this is the original blue front door from the film Notting Hill. The last time I came through this, there were rather a lot of press people outside.
If Hollywood needs an updated Hugh Grant for a reboot of Notting Hill, they might do well to call Julian Topham. Well-spoken, charming, with good looks to boot, we could easily picture Julian adjacent the next Julia Roberts. Like most rom-com formulas, this story is about passion, relationship-ending plot twists,
financial takeovers.
but we're still waiting for the tear-jerking ending. I don't know, maybe it's already happened. Maybe I was lied to all my life and rom-coms don't accurately reflect the world we actually live in. As the Wave Bristol finds its footing post-ownership change, the story is still very much being written, so apologies as there are no neatly tied-up closure statements here. In the spirit of truth revealed through long-winded open conversation, we've left this podcast a bit raw. Yes, I ask questions, Julian answers those questions, but he also asks me a lot of questions, which I'm not always comfortable with. A good podcast edit, like a vintage 90s rom-com, has a clearly defined beginning, middle, and end. This story, however, is still being written. Sorry, I'm just looking up buttons.
No, don't worry, you get it.
I'm
And also,
over-
I've got a little bit of I had been actually a little bit poorly last week, so I've got a bit of a croaky throat. So I hope that's not going to be too annoying, or whether you can chop it out if it is really annoying.
No, it sounds great. Most of our audience half our audience is American, so they'll find the charming British accent, so you can...
That's going to work, is it?
Yeah, if you
They think we're intelligent. It's the best illusion ever.
Totally. You can slip into a Cockney accent. They won't know the difference.
Yeah.
Go into a Northerner Jon Snow accent. They might like that as well.
Okay, I'll go for that.
Right on. Well,
Yeah.
well, cheers. It's good to meet you, Julian.
Very good to meet you. Very good to meet you.
So-
It's good to pleasure to be a part of this sector.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and talking about your background and how you came into this position. Let's talk about that. Let listeners understand what you did before and how that parlays into what you're doing now.
Yeah. Okay. So I started running a surfing event back in 1999 that then became Boardmasters Festival in the UK, and it's now a very, very big, I think, second or third biggest festival in the country. And really, it was about we took on the rights to an ASP World Tour event at that point, but what it gave us is a license to kind of run and operate the beach, which meant beach bars and everything else. And kind of quite quickly, we figured out that the surfing was a cost, and the opportunity to bring revenue in was via the beach bar and all the ancillary things. So it was an exercise in filling a beach bar as much as anything else. And in year two, people would leave the beach bar at 5 o'clock, and the following year we put on DJs at 5 o'clock, and that kept people there for longer, and the beer take was bigger and all the rest of it, and it kind of grew and grew and grew. We put on bands, we did full concerts, and now by the end it was 65,000 people weekend camping. And we took that model of sort of action sports, entertainment, music, and replicated it. We had a skate and BMX event we did called NAS. We did a big snowboard and music event called Freeze Festival. And so that was my business of 23 years, which I then sold out, or we sold it to a festival company. Since then, I've done some other ventures. I chair Surfing England, which is a charitable role. And along that journey, I've obviously known about the Wave since day one, and I've knew Nick Hounsfield for many, many years. And through the interaction with Boardmasters and the Wave as businesses, obviously it became aware it's a small sector, that there was difficulties and challenges in making this business work. So kind of bit by bit, I got more involved in that conversation.
Okay.
So a long time commercializing surfing, I would say.
Okay. And in looking at that, what are some of the parallels between filling a beach bar and filling a Wave Garden Lagoon Cove?
Yeah. So do you know, I think a surprising amount, actually, because what we got very good at is kind of building a business from the ground up, but building a business around surfing and more broadly around surf culture and around the way that people could experience surf culture, and you could make that kind of work commercially. And then beyond that, how you also made it accessible to a much broader market. So you brought people into it who wanted to kind of touch and feel that world, the magic of the surf sector, the surf culture we live within. So, and I think a lot of that is applicable to this. You know, you look at it on the one hand on a sort of two-dimensional level, and it's like you switch on your wave machine and it puts on waves of any different shape and size you want. People come and surf. You know, that's one aspect of it. But I'm not sure, you know, and you're probably going to get to 60% occupancy doing that. But really the question is how you squeeze the pips and you get to 80, 90% occupancy, but also how the rest of the site works, what that experience is, how non-surfers will come here and enjoy it still.
Okay.
And that really is a massive part of what Bristol particularly is about, as a sort of out of town surf retreat, if you like. So actually the sort of the journey I went on and building it from the ground up and taking those customer journeys is I think surprisingly applicable. And obviously having spent 20 odd years, 25 years in the surf sector, that just, you know, you know it inside out. You've got relationships which are all very, very helpful, and you understand, I guess, the rules and codes of the community, and you live within it. So it's kind of it's simple to act within it.
Okay. And then did you ever like in your wildest dreams just kind of think that, okay, I'm filling a bar at an event at the beach,
Yeah.
you know, I'll be this 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 is works at a wave pool as well.
Well, I didn't necessarily get that far with the thought process. It was always more kind
Mhm.
of a little bit more hand to mouth. But what I definitely did think is that, you know, we would trade our entire business, and this was a, you know, this was a 15 million pound turnover festival, and we would trade the entire thing over 4 days, and that was risky because, you know, the weather, you know, it plays ball or doesn't play ball. You've got kind of huge commercial impacts in that. So I forever dreamt of having something that was a bit more static, that
Mm.
you could, you know, that you could kind of work with and mold and, you know, play with the levers a little bit more. Whereas an event, it appears and disappears, and then you're kind of scratching your head after it, going, God, what are we going to do next year? And, you know, you're trying to capture so many things, and then you get another, you know, 12 months later, you have another go at improving it, and then it rolls again. So
Okay.
it has challenges. I've craved something else.
Okay. And it sounds like the similarity there is that they're very there's millions of pounds involved in both. Does
Yeah.
that add to kind of your stress levels, your cortisone levels? How do you deal with that running an event and then running a multi-million-dollar wave pool?
Yeah, I mean, they both, you know, we ran multiple events, so they were both, you know, my previous business was of a similar scale to this business. So on a kind of operational level, it's kind of well in my wheelhouse. I think what you know, I'm also someone who's built business from the ground up, and to some extent, with a restart here, this is a bit of a process in kind of rebuilding or continuing the evolution of what it, you know, what it already is. Um, so I feel very comfortable with that journey, and it's a journey of discovery, right? The sector's so young. You know, it's fascinating, you know, even at the Surf Park Summit, you know, a few weeks ago, seeing the evolution of the business models and, you know, the directions that people are taking, and, you know, things are starting to stabilize, there's starting to be consistency. Whereas, you know, when the first kind of outliers go out, it's like, you know, my early festival days, there are all these different mad projects, and eventually formats and structures and strategies sort of stabilize and become consistent, and everyone starts to look a little bit more like each other. So, you know, and that sort of de-risks it. So I think the journey of, you know, the journey of evolution here and figuring out how to make the business work around the wave pool, which is, you know, obviously is amazing in its own right, is exciting. I don't find that daunting at all. I think by virtue of what this wave has been through, it's a sort of recapitalized business, if you like. And I think one of the sort of massive challenges for the early part of the sector is just that how you capitalize these wave pools, right? You know, they're enormously expensive to build, and there's got to be some significant capital uplift somewhere to, you know, to pay down the cost of these pools, because pushing waves is not necessarily going to do it, or is not going to provide
Okay.
a good return on investment.
Okay. Well, let's segue into how you came about this role, like how you became CEO at the Wave. And do you want to explain to our listeners how that
Yeah.
process
So
happened?
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen I've seen the Wave since since its inception. So it was a mad idea of Nick Hounsfield, and I've known him from the industry for many years. And and then subsequent to that, we've had a relationship with it between my festival Boardmasters and the Waves of Business. We have cost promotions and various things, and it was known in the industry, and it was evident coming here as a customer that it just had financial challenges. That was a sort of a fairly well kind of known fact, and it came to a head about a year ago, and became obvious that perhaps this was these were becoming insurmountable challenges. And I was contacted by the administrators that it was going through a process, and there was going to be a restructure or an administration process of sorts, and kind of put my hat in the ring. And I'd sold my business at that point. I had a couple of years out. It felt like a good project. It was somewhere that was very important to me. I surfed with my kids. It's a complete community hub. You meet my 25 years of work contacts here. Every time I come here, you bump into kind of people of old, and it just felt like something that needed to be put back on its track, and find a good future. And so I was motivated by that. I was motivated. I had confidence in my journey within the sector, and that I could apply it to this. So I bid on within the administration process, and convinced that the kind of the key stakeholders in the administration that I had a good plan for it, and people went with it. So I became the owner.
Okay. And then within that transition, I know it was kind of tumultuous, and there were stories online. WavePool and Great in the UK to close, and it was really kind of detrimental. And then back and forth, there were from two distinct camps emerged throughout the separation process.
Mhm.
And we've been in contact with both. Is there anything you want to clear up, maybe from the BBC articles or the Beach Grid articles?
Yeah, I think not so much from the articles. We took a view through that process that we weren't going to comment. We're following instructions. You're following a process, so we kind of stayed away from that. I think the sort of I think what I can explain and kind of set out is that it's the administration process is a very kind of blunt tool for what essentially was a very complicated intergroup sale of sorts of a business that wasn't prepared for such. And as such, it's highly complex, and there were elements of it that weren't designed to be separated, and certainly none of it was sort of planned to be separated as such. So you've got anything from things like sort of system ownerships to where staff go. And bear in mind, this is two companies separating, so things are spanning both sides of that company. You've got staff, you've got payment systems, you've got where insurance sits, who pays for the insurance, you've got website bills, you've got capitalized project, you've got intercompany loans, you've got a really complex matrix of things that have got to be unpicked at speed. And at the same time, we're opening our doors and trying to kind of get them open and trade, because we've got to build the future of the business, and we've got customers who've booked surfs and all the rest of it. So I think really the sort of, it's just incredibly complex. And with that, your stories were put out, and it's very hard to explain what's actually going on. We're following the guidelines of advisors, lawyers, and obviously the independent administrators who are running the process, and working through it piece by piece. And it took time, and sometimes a painfully long amount of time, and it's complex and it's sensitive. So it wasn't without its challenges, but we worked well with the other group over a long period of time through complex issues, and we've now got to a point where those are all resolved, and it's kind of onwards. And I think for both of us, we can look forwards. They've got important projects that they're building and developing, and we've got Bristol to get back on its feet and make sure the kind of future looks solid. So it
Okay.
was, yeah, and it was as I say, it was a complicated process.
Yeah, I know. And at the time, there were a lot of hurt feelings. There were employees who were unsure for that period where the wave was closed. Looking back, is there anything that you would have done differently?
No, I think the sort of, because you don't know the answers, you can't communicate. And I think that, and then we chose with that to just kind of keep our heads down and keep working on the process, because we knew eventually we would get there. And the harder we work, the quicker we got there, the quicker we communicate and sort of relieve the pain. And I think that the two big areas were obviously staff and team, welfare of the business going forward, so you can maintain that, and customers, the customers who've bought an enormous amount of prepaid surfs in the form of what we had as bundles and also vouchers, and surfs that were just booked in, that people had bought online that were booked for a future date. And I think one of the challenging parts is that we took much longer than we wanted to be able to go back to those customers and explain what was going to happen. And whilst we went out, with a clear position that everything was going to be honoured and people were going to get their surfs, no one's going to lose money, which we've done 100%. We couldn't give actuals to it. So, a month went by and people couldn't access their bundles and they wanted to come and surf, and they perhaps got to buy another surf, and they've still got these credits. And that obviously just caused tensions. At the same time, the customer base was so incredibly supportive of what we were going through. B, I think the sort of a reset philosophy that became clear, I think primarily through our change in the pricing structure, and a kind of I think a change in culture. I'm someone who's been in the industry for a long time, and I think that the wave makers and the team here got behind the fact it was a kind of an independent company again, and it just changed the spirit of it overnight. And everyone seemed to really like, and the customers supported that, and they gave us just the bandwidth to sort of resolve things. And it was a really, really challenging, but kind of rewarding and very humbling process to go through, because we were just given a lot of support. It was it's not me being given the support. It was the power of the wave, the power of what's been built here, and the team that run it.
Okay. You mentioned your role as CEO and owner. So you're running it, you own it. How did you purchased it with the sale
Exactly.
from your other business? And you wanted this particular wave pool.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. And then so why the wave, and why not start a new development somewhere else with a similar amount of money?
Well, I mean, the sort of the figures to build a new one are an awful lot bigger than taking on this one. So and I as an aside, in the kind of 2-3 years before getting involved in this, I was exploring some kind of surf hotel based kind of concepts, and all of which kind of segued into this. And I think it's back to that point that this is a really important place. It's a really, really important place for the surf community at large in the UK. And much as we feud, we also are, there's ingrained friendships and and a very, very big community here, which I've been a part of for a long time. So it was just a really good project to get into and get behind. And it felt that and a lot of people commented on the day that it closed, and how the kind of heartache that people felt around that, and it felt like it was just a really important thing to reestablish it. So commercially, I thought it was interesting. I think it's only in the kind of the very, very foothills of its journey, so I think there's a long way to go with it, which is exciting. And I think culturally it's very, very symbolic and important and iconic, and we need to kind of make it so so there was a kind of a quest there to cement its place in the future, and what a fascinating sector. And this is a 6-year-old surf park, so we walk into one of the most advanced operating systems in the surf park market, and that in its own right is interesting, because there's a world of opportunity out there.
Yeah. And I think for listeners who haven't been to the wave, one thing you notice when you walk from the parking lot to the main hub there is it's very kind of warm inside. A lot of people know each other. You walk out toward the pool, you see people, talking to friends, gathering. It's very much a social gathering place, and someone is always seeing someone that they know. I always end up bumping into someone I know. And then
Yeah.
you have the added cultural integration, I guess, with, some of your surf coaches and your lifeguards. I mean, that was their first water experience, was at the wave, learning to surf in the wave, and they go on to become coaches and such. So it's a very ingrained culture as far as a lot of the wave pools that I've visited, and that's truly unique. So
I think it's really unique. I think that's right. And there's sort of there's kind of homegrown wave pool surfers here who are very good surfers.
yeah,
And I also think, as I just my eyes were opened, back to the Surf Park Summit again. The eyes were opened as to kind of what's going on in the wider sector. I hadn't appreciated that. I'd walked into Bristol and was really just focused on Bristol, and I think what you start to realize is that these are going to be there's going to be a lot of wave parks, and as they become kind of numerous, the ability to build those kind of cultural roots, I think, is going to become harder and harder. So I think Bristol will always have a very unique place in being, the first of the kind of real, future generation wave parks, and that's a direction of travel for us. Like, how do we, it won't be the biggest or the shiniest, and I've just seen the Virginia Beach development, and it's absolutely kind of mind blowing. And Bristol, as you well know, because you've been here, is so far removed from that, but it has something really, really magic. And I think it has something magic that others will struggle to replicate. And as the sector grows and they multiply, I think it'll be even harder to replicate that. So, I think the big, the journey here, or the sort of vision, is to how do we sort of unlock that? How do we repurpose that, make it commercially viable, and make it and secure its kind of future as a business and a place and a cultural destination?
Okay.
And it's that gathering spot. That's what we will always be. We won't be the biggest wave, but we'll be a gathering spot, I think, like no other.
Okay. And let's I'd like to go on in your short time as CEO of the Wave. I want to go back to your kind of learning curve. What there's the kind of
Rapid.
rapid vertical possibly.
Yeah.
But the what are some things that stood out? Like, what took you by surprise, where you're like, okay, I'd kind of planned for this one thing was way more difficult than I anticipated, and I had planned on this other thing being difficult, but it in fact was easier. What is
Yeah.
something that
So
just kind of like a few things that stood out to you?
so the operation of the business was daunting, and I inherited the when we talk about that, the way the company separated, the entire operating team, head office, one side, and the operating team were kind of the other side. The operating team, so they continued with the new venture, and they were just phenomenal, absolutely kind of phenomenal. And so that was so much easier, and I just got the benefit of 6 years worth of developed systems that really would have taken 6 years to redevelop if we'd had to. So that side of it was really, was amazing. And what I subsequently learned is that our kind of our operations process and our health and safety systems and our safety systems on the lake are really second to none. So that was a sort of win. What I also kind of probably overlooked is, I think you look at these things and you kind of think, you switch your machine on, and, the waves roll, and you set your size and the surfers turn up. And what I've, come to understand is the complexity of segmenting customer groups, identifying different wave types, profiles of people that are going to surf on them, and actually then changing from, rather than just kind of pushing waves, the experience and the sort of social journey of why people come and engage with it. So the kind of logic is, you just put on an advanced setting and you got 20 spots and you sell them. But what you get into very quickly is it's not really about that. It's about the pathway that people taking within that surfing journey. And that's how people engage with it, with the wave park, differently. So, so it's about where you're going to get to, or you're on a kind of a static path, or it's about social cohesion. So therefore, the way you appeal to customers and develop customer relationships, the way you program your wave mix, the way people interact with your business and your F&B and your residential, is kind of completely different and much, much more complicated. And if we take, let's say, an hour slot out for a pathway that's going to run every Tuesday evening at 6 p.m., where the wave type may be changing because people are progressing from beginner to intermediate to advanced, you've taken a whole piece of inventory off market that you've now got to target, package, and sell to a specific group of people that are sort of isolated from the people who just come and surf on a kind of regular basis. So you've got a much, much more complicated matrix of relationships with your customers than I ever anticipated. And as you play around with that wave mix, your inventory, the hours of surf, 95% of your generated revenue, you're kind of, so you're casting the future of what you could or could not earn by those decisions, and the price at which you set them at. So that aspect of it has been fascinating and infinitely more complex and complicated than I ever anticipated, and is now something that we're going very, very kind of heavy on embarking on, how we can simplify that process and build tools. I mean, I think you probably know a little bit about our kind of Wavescapes and IP system, how we can build tools to simplify that process. And we've set up a project, and we're looking at, how we can scrape data and redefine data and start to simulate, because to think that everyone else is going to be doing that around the world is kind of mind-boggling, and systems will do it better for us in time, but they don't exist. We've
Yeah.
got to build everything firsthand.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's sounds like the opposite of like, okay, we've got this event, it's a beautiful day, everyone's going to turn up. It sounds much
Yeah,
more nuanced.
much more
Wave
nuanced.
pool.
That bit, that bit's the easy bit. It's kind of, the kind of the fairy dust, the events, all the all the extra bits and pieces. That for me feels very straightforward. It's the core of the way you engage your customers, and you make it open and accessible for your new surfers, and then you take them on that journey, and they become regular customers, and that's the absolute kind of heartbeat of it all.
Yeah, yeah, and I've discovered that in conversations with CEOs and surf ops managers at wave pools around the world, is that
Mm.
typically that is like the magic is all the subtleties that you read about a wave pool in a newspaper, and it's like this wave pool opened up, it's going to be filled, but there are all these like tiny layers, hourly slots, 7 days a week that require very special attention.
Well, I think it's
I-
exactly it. And it was kind of, again, it was polarized, because this, I've referenced Surf Park Summer again, but it was where you kind of see the kind of the pool, the ecosystem of the wave park world in its kind of entirety. And it was really fascinating. There was an operators group, and we talked specifically about health and safety and operating type subject matter, but it's really interesting how different the conversation is between people who are operating and people who are planning to operate. And there's an entirely different level there, because as you get into the weeds of what running these things kind of really takes, and if there'll be business models where these things are just play tools in the middle of very, very big developments, and perhaps they're not trying to squeeze the pips out of what it culturally represents or how busy their lake is. But for us, as the original ones, and others that I was talking to, it's really, really vitally important. We've got to make these things sing, and you've got to be absolutely in the kind of minutiae of detail about how you're programming it, and who's it appealing to, and what's their journey, and what's their interaction. And and the stickiness is because they come with friends, not necessarily because of the wave you're pushing. So it's all about developing all those really, really kind of soft, the social aspects of it around the outside of it, more so than the pushing the waves.
Yeah, that's really interesting. You mentioned that, having the conversation between actual operators and people who were going to be operators, and just what they were realized that they had to do. And I'm imagining people just going pale and thinking about other job tactics and stuff. So let's talk about what changes you're bringing to the wave. Like, what wasn't there once the dust had cleared, once you got everything back up and running, and you're mentioning some of these nuances. What else are you bringing to the wave that maybe wasn't there before?
Well, the sort of the top of my list is probably a car park.
Everyone's been struggling with that. Do you still have the holes? Or
Yeah,
is
well, we got the potholes. It's now sort of, I've seen Facebook images of people kind of being,
stuck?
swimmers being kind of dropped in there or
I,
superimposed into our potholes.
yeah, no, I was surprised to learn how much it costs to fill
Oh, it's not, yeah,
potholes. It's like,
yeah. The potholes are expensive. I think they're about 50,000 to do a kind of a quick
oh,
kind
jeez.
of facelift that won't last very long in our current climate.
Hmm.
But that'll do a few months. But no, so and for those that don't know, I mean, I still, when I have to explain it to people, I'm mesmerized by how ridiculous it sounds. But our car park is 1 kilometer from the clubhouse, effectively. So every customer has to walk 1 kilometer up a very nice track, which, if you're in the right soulful mood, is a pleasant experience. If you've got family in tow and it's raining and you've had a surf and you're walking back to your car, it's not such a pleasant experience. So, so the kind of the absolute primary is that we want to move that up onto the site, and we've got a very supportive council who are hopefully going to help us do that. And I think the interesting thing is Bristol now is a kind of a reverse development. So we didn't have or we don't have the infrastructure the modern wave park would typically build into its business plan to underpin the wave itself and the capital requirements of building that wave, where they'll have the big resi schemes, that the F&B, the restaurants, the co-working, all the rest of it. And so, but here we've got this beautiful lake out in the rolling hills, and we've got to kind of retrospectively build that infrastructure. So, yes, it's about a car park and the functionality of that customer experience, but also about residential and how people, we get people to stay on site. And one of the things we're looking at for this summer is taking kind of temporary camping licenses that you can use in this country for 60 days and opening up 2 more fields, which will significantly increase the capacity, and just having a kind of, not a festival vibe to it by any stretch of imagination, but a kind of glamping, lightweight, kind of a lot more people on site through the course of the summer, so we can run it open into the evenings, and the bar trades a little bit later, and we can do different experiments around F&B and some light entertainment and music and what have you. So we're going to kind of push in those directions, all of which is really exciting. But at the very heart of it, it's about a kind of a broader non-lake experience. We've been through the lake side of it, which we talked about earlier. We're kind of clear on that. So then it's just expanding it. And, one of the things we talk about a lot is that now it's quite a binary surfer experience. You come here to surf, you stay in our tents to surf. And really, we've got to make it a residential experience where you can come here and spend a week, and you can do various things around the area. We're in the doorstep of Bristol, which is an amazing city, and surrounding beautiful countryside. You can book in your surfs. You've got other activities that you can do on the site, and you can spend a week here. And and I think that's very much the kind of direction of travel for us.
Okay.
So that's where we'll kind of that's where we'll push.
Yeah, and I've seen that, and it is the last time I was there, the work from your cafe and surf in the afternoon
Yeah.
crowd was pretty thick. A lot of people
It's
doing
really
that.
thick, and it goes back into that community piece that we talked about, and we're going to make it a high performance hub for Surfing England, and a kind of coaching center, and a kind of center of excellence. So we're going to add all those dimensions in. That just means it really is a sort of the kind of spiritual hub of the certainly the inland surf sector.
Okay, and then your first goal is the car park.
Yeah, I think it has to.
The famed the famed car park.
Yeah,
So
well, we've got some bikes going in the interim, and then I hope it won't be too long.
yeah, but it's interesting because you mentioned that, and yeah, if you're in the right frame of mind, the walk is fine. You're going up. It's you've got the signs posted. This 500 meters till perfect waves, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I have walked from the pool at night during a storm, and my friend Hannah Bristol was nearly blown over. So I
Yeah,
do
with your
definitely.
longboard flapping around,
Yeah.
catching the wind. Actually, they have very good sails though. If you get the right kind of wind and angle on your board
Aha.
and on your skateboard, and you can almost kind of wing fall the whole way.
I'm sure someone has tried that. What do you want to bring to the table to offer more in surf offerings? Is your wave schedule going to stay the same? Are you going to
No,
change it?
actually, we are going to change it. And we're actually at the back end of 3 days of wave testing with Wave Garden. So we've just been running a whole load of new waves and products, and I haven't had a full debrief from the team, but the kind of the excitement levels. The park's been closed here for 3 days, so we're closed in the early part of the week now. So we've been running this testing, and all the surf ops team have done hundreds and hundreds of hours of surfing on them. And so very excited about some new settings that are coming through, and I think one thing we talked a lot about is just the sort of the pathway through the wave mix, and how they sort of link up. So having kind of flat sessions where the wave stays the same height, so you might have an intermediate or advanced where it stays at one level and you're content with that, or you got kind of step up sessions where it goes from an advanced to an advanced plus, so that you help to kind of bridge your journey through the different waves. So yeah, we're just looking at a lot of kind of details around how we can do that, and some new settings that we're bringing on. So it's kind of constant evolution, but we'll be bringing a whole new range of settings out early next year, and it's exciting. And the one thing you've got here is that it's just extraordinary technology, and you can play around with wave sizes. I mean, it's crazy to if we were discussing this 10 years ago, it would have been mind-boggling. But the fact you can just set all these different variations is just I'm still trying to get my head around it. It's just incredible. So I think we're going to be I think we're going to be a lot more playful around what we do in the pool.
Okay. And then, yeah, going back to that, I remember speaking with Joe, Dale, and Andy Kochefer about the changing the wave settings so it's a little easier to get into at the beginning and intermediate level, and how that was a lot of work. But now with Wave Garden, 12 pools open globally. What are you benefiting from them? Their software? Are they sending wave programs over, or are you on your own?
No, they're amazing to work with, and they're constantly evolving. What becomes a bit more nuanced is that because everyone's got a different kind of shape to their pool, it all reacts slightly differently to the waves. So you'll run these same settings, but they don't. You know this very well because you probably surfed more different wave parks than anyone else. But
Yeah, yeah,
but they
they do
react
vary.
differently. Yeah, they react differently to these different settings. So it's not one size fits all. So actually, it becomes a little bit more nuanced. So there's been a lot of talk about the kind of easy takeoff mode, which you'll set on top of a wave, and it'll have a slower start and it'll build up. But actually, we've been running that for the last year, and the feedback is that it doesn't work so well in our pool because it kind of creates this ridge through the middle. And actually, if we go for the steeper takeoff, which isn't a whole load harder, there's a more consistent push through the wave. So that's one of the kind of overriding topics that I've heard talked about the most over the last few days, that actually we're going to go back to some of our original settings and push those. So, particularly the advanced ones been talked about as people preferred the original advanced with what effectively was the steeper takeoff, but it doesn't necessarily play out like that. So yeah, it's incredible information from Wavegarden, but you do have to adapt it to your environment and your customers as well.
Okay, yeah, yeah, and I have noticed that going to the different coves around. Each one is unique and different. And there's also the branding that you're doing with your setting, whether you're calling it Advanced Plus, or just Advanced. Like, yeah, one of the first things I noticed was Advanced in Bristol was very much different than Advanced in Melbourne at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
So are you in talking about calibrating waves for your local consumers, for your surfers? Are you finding the basic language with the Wavegarden settings is
Yeah.
helping and working with
Well, I
that,
see,
like the M1 or the
yeah,
T2?
exactly. It's do you know it's a subject of much debate, and again back to the kind of operators gathering. It is it was something that was brought. It was a thing of subject. So I think we've got kind of two views on it. One is I think the sort of the technical description from Wavegarden, like we're not protective over those, so we're quite comfortable with saying what they are. We don't market them as such because we think it's a technical meaning, and it doesn't necessarily represent what the wave is giving you. And the big question is for people to kind of correlate, or certainly for the new customers to correlate where they're likely to fit into the kind of wave selection. And giving an M3 type name, it's hard for people to do that. Whereas if you give it a descriptive setting, it's a little bit easier. So I think we will definitely stick with our setting names to sort of facilitate that kind of surfer pathway. What we did talk about collectively is it's just looking at there was talk about standardized systems, so standardized safety systems, standardized lifeguarding systems, minimum alcohol thresholds, tolerances, rules. So we talked a lot about having a sort of a kind of an operating standard for wave parks across the world. And one of the subjects was whether we standardize the kind of wave sizes. And the example that was referenced was the kind of the alpine environment where you've got a kind of a color coding for your different waves, accepting that everyone's going to have their localized names and different obviously languages and all the rest of it coming to bear. And also with the different machines, they're going to have different names of settings. So actually probably the easiest thing is just to have this kind of consistent color scheme. So I think that would be really helpful. And then we will then probably stick with our own interpretation of names of that are fit for our customer group. And typically the Australian settings are all kind of bigger than ours, and they like to push a lot of big waves over there. So as they all say, so yeah, I think that is it's complicated, but I think that will be the direction of travel.
Okay. Well, it's in talking about that, adapting the wave pool more to British surf culture. in in your area. And we were talking earlier about people who've learned to surf there, and then the coast is just not too far away. Um, how do you see the way going forward, the wave working with British surfing, British
Mm.
surfing? Just
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like
Well, yeah,
integrating. Are
absolutely.
you like you
I'm going
mentioned
to give
the
my version of it, but I'd be more fascinated to ask you that question. But someone who's going to see it. But do you know, I get asked the question, and because I've kind of stepped into this role, taken on this business, I kind of get asked it from people I know a lot, and people who don't know it, what's it about? And it's just the most amazing. It's an amazing place to come and spend time and experience. That's kind of a given. They're just really, really fun. But beyond that, it's just the most incredible access point to surfing. And I've been through trying to get, teaching my kids to surf, and I live in London, and I'm landlocked and all the rest of it, and we endlessly go on surf trips around the world. And it's a really, if you don't have, kind of daily access to reasonably good surfing beach break, then it's an incredibly hard thing to learn. And what I just love about these the surf parks is just the accessibility they offer that for everyone, not just on a kind of skill level basis, or making it child friendly, but to different socioeconomic groups and all the rest of it. So I think it's just that overriding accessibility, and we all know how rewarding the journey of surf is, and what it does for you as a person, the culture around it, the life opportunities it can open up, the health benefits or benefits of it, all the rest of it. So I just think it just unlocks that and makes it accessible to so many more people. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So it doesn't by any stretch replace surfing, but I think it allows more people to learn to surf, and therefore enjoy surfing all around the world, and travel with it and surf on beaches and surf in the sea. And,
yeah.
ultimately that's what we all love as well.
Yeah, you and I are talking with each other. We're both lifelong surfers, and it's what do you think it is about surfing that fundamentally benefits a person and ultimately changes them, maybe, or shapes how they view the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's I always think it was that comment in the Kissed by God, the Andy Irons documentary, where he made a comment about the only time he felt kind of set, calm, was when he was, out in the sea and surfing. And it's just, you know, I, I know there've been lots of studies done, and when I have the time, I'd love to kind of get into the weeds of what the Blue Earth kind of benefits are. But what we all know is the combination of getting in the sea, paddling like a madman, brief seconds of exhilaration in my case, and for a long period of time, and getting out absolutely drained and having fun with friends and anything else doing it, it's just the most incredible experience, isn't it? And you get out just feeling great. And it's and I think like a lot of exercise as well, you can go in with one mindset and come out with another one.
Yeah.
It is transitionary. And how one breaks down what actually is happening there, I don't know, but I know that we all love the feeling of it,
Yeah.
and allowing more people to access that. And that's why I just, I'm sure you do the same, but you just encourage people to go. And now these surf lakes are just such an easy access point to get on that journey.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And maybe we have to come up with something because whenever talking about, tennis or golf or other kind of activity anchored developments, recreationally or residential, we always come off kind of like snobs, like, oh, but surfing's the best, and I'm still
Yeah,
trying to find a
yeah, yeah,
way
yeah.
around that without sounding like such a I don't know, kind of stuck up snob. Like, no, no, but
Yeah, yeah.
surfing isn't
Surf,
tennis.
surf snob.
Yeah,
Yeah,
surf snob, and then, everyone's like, "Oh, you have some dedication to golf," and, people who are just avid golfers and feel that.
yeah,
So I'm looking at the world through a surf lens, which, has its benefits, but also not so much because 'cause I'm surf snob.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, right on, Julian. Is there, anything else you'd like to add before we close out?
No, I don't think so. I think we've covered a fair bit. I was got 100 questions I'd rather be asking you. Looking at the sort of the sector. I mean, like I say, surf some again, but there was the incredible kind of gathering of kind of futurists. All sort of, it was like kind of like a gold rush, wasn't it? And everyone's there and
Yeah.
speculating about these kind of big opportunities. And and I'm interested by the sort of the stabilization of it. You know, what you've seen as the kind of major trends as people kind of organize themselves, it becomes an industry, you know, and you know, where do you see consistent? Where do you see it sort of playing out in terms of probably the business models? I guess I'm driving at as much as
Yeah.
anything else.
Yeah, yeah. The change has been amazing. We're just I'm writing a piece on Kelly Slater's 10-year anniversary for when he debuted his wave, and it basically so much has changed. And at the time, everyone was just kind of high on like, yeah, circular wave pools will work. Yeah, put a wave pool in a box, that kind of thing. But then very much as the industry is discovering, as you are with your lagoon scheduling, that it's way more nuanced than that. And there was this just kind of sugar high at the beginning where, yeah, but they'll just be everywhere and we'll do this. But I think we're at a point now, 10 years on, where it's the refinement, all the kind of like life everywhere and business everywhere as it gets infinitely more complex. And then you factor in something like surfing and it becomes, mind-blowing, uh, complicated. But yeah, a lot of that, everyone's after data. I remember because you'll be able to better reach your customers who want to surf during that hour. And, just a few years ago, talking to James Miles at Urban Surf and at the time, yeah, Melbourne, it was, he was just, like, scraping, trying to get more data to build these, better marketing pieces, because you can throw an event, like they'd partner with Ferrari for something, and you don't know if it's working. It's kinda like, "Okay, we did this big thing," and it's like people turned up, "Okay, that's good," but that is so different than saying, "Okay, I'm gonna get Joe over here into the pool at 11 AM for this wave because he's just learning to do his backside turns," that
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
thing.
And what's his future purchase pattern going to be? You know.
Exactly. Yes, where does Joe really wanna be a surfer, or is this,
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah,
other which is interesting because there's the whole and I forgot to ask you this, but on the journey, I know for a lot of wave pools have, like, kind of the bucket list client. So you
Mhm,
have someone come in and they just wanna learn to surf or learn to
mhm,
surf in a wave pool. So they have that one-time experience,
mhm,
and then they're off and they're gone, they're doing something else. I
mhm.
I I forgot to ask, are you doing anything to kind of curate to get them back, to, get them to become, a lifelong surfer?
I think there's an element of with Bristol of it just because it was one of the first waves. People will come through and surf it and kind of move on an international level. I think for us, um, I think it's the broader experience that brings people back. So I think you get into the same conversation about the kind of the wider development of the site and it not being so kind of binary surf that
Okay.
brings those kind
Yeah.
of there's the less kind of consistent customers back. And then I think really all the focus for us is about where the future surfers are coming from. So, we really changed our pricing and really dropped, almost made it kind of break even the kind of beginner and entry level of our surf pricing
Mhm. Okay.
to make sure the very top of our funnel, if you like, is as affordable as possible. And that's the smallest barrier to entry because we all know, and we've talked about it, about how, kind of addictive surfing is once you get into it and once you get past a certain level. So the kind of mindset is that we've got to just bring as many people we can kind of through that group. What becomes quite interesting is the you asked about it sort of, kind of culturally, is how numerous surf parks around the world and the accessibility it affords and the dilutive surf experience. Because surfing now and surfing in coastal environments, you go into surf type regions, you immerse yourself in surf culture, you interact with surf shops, you interact with locals, you interact with, for good and in some cases for bad, but largely for the good, you immerse yourself in the sector. And as these become city destinations
Mhm.
worldwide, where you've got very, very broad accessibility, and therefore the kind of the interaction with the surf community is heavily, heavily diluted by virtue of kind of volume. It's going to be very interesting to see how that impacts surfing at large,
Interesting. Yeah, and that goes
surf culture.
Yeah, and that goes on with every pool I visited has such a unique and different kind of culture that is
Yeah,
born out of, there's some already established surfers, there are some people who've just learned to surf. You compare something like Waco, where you get people driving up from the Gulf Coast,
yeah,
and then you have locals who've just learned to surf there, and they're, you know, head on and just love it, to a place like Korea, where you have very much like a urban young population who very much want to learn surfing. So they're mimul, the tap
yeah,
water surfers, and
yeah,
they're
yeah,
and that's great. That's all they want to do. And then you have the core surfers, very very few who are coming from the coast and driving 4 hours across the peninsula to go to the wave pool. But
yeah, yeah,
yeah. So that was good. I got to turn the question back to you. So thank you.
yeah.
Try to remain hidden, but yeah.
I've got many more. When you're here next, you're gonna be that traveling surfer that I got to bring back,
Okay. Well,
and
it's
then I
a
can
yeah.
pin you the rest of my questions.
Well, it's great meeting you, Julian, and it's thanks for taking time out and going through all this. Thank you very much for
I look
joining
forward
the
to that.
podcast.
That's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
All the best.
The WavePoolMag podcast is made possible due to support from WavePool operators, technology providers, and the growing list of companies doing business in the surf park space. For commercial opportunities, reach out to us at hello@wavepoolmag.com. Thank you and stay stoked.